Well, welcome to Startup Grind. We're excited to have you. 12 years ago, I started to plot my way out of my corporate job. I had become dissatisfied with my inability to have a huge impact, to be truly creative, and to get the ideas out of my head that seemed to keep me up at night. So before work, I started to go to Starbucks at 7:30 in the morning, just a few miles from here, down the street, before heading to my real job at 9 a.m., working all day, and then going home and working on my ideas again. About 18 months into this process, my wife came to me one evening and said that she was pregnant with our first of what is now 4 children. And immediately thought how wonderful this news was, because this seemed like the perfect time to quit my job. Much to the concern of basically everyone that knew me, loved me, or had any interactions with me, 6 weeks after our son was born, in the summer of 2009, in the middle of the Great Recession, I quit my job and took the leap. And once the adrenaline wore off, reality really sunk in. Being alone and trying to create a future for your family, like probably many of you have faced, I faced so many challenges I was totally unequipped to be prepared for. See, big companies spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars training their employees to be ready for the jobs that they need them to do. But in a startup, you have nothing. No one cares what you're working on, except for your parents and one of your sisters. 6 months after leaving my job, and 10 years ago this month, a friend and I talked about creating a forum to solve this problem that we had for ourselves. People could brainstorm, people would help each other, they would learn, they would share ideas, and that's when Startup Grind was born. We didn't take pictures or video of the first event because it was never meant to be anything. It was just good people getting together and helping each other push their companies and careers ahead. The first event was a success, so we did it again, and we did it again. But 6 months in, after one event, I remember vividly sitting in my car for 5 or 10 minutes and thinking what a waste of time Startup Grind was. Only 4 people had come to the event that night, and 2 of them were me and the co-founder. It truly seemed that no one still cared about what we were working on. To make matters worse, that same month, I had launched a product that I had raised several $100,000s of angel funding on that had completely flopped. All indicators pointed towards shutting Startup Grind down and starting with a totally clean slate. But something inside said, just keep going a little bit longer and try harder. And 6 weeks later, we hosted our next event, and 40 people showed up. They were all strangers, but many of them became my friends, and they're still my friends today. And that was what created a small spark that started to light a fire. The next event had 60, and then 80, and then 100, and then 150. People loved the education, they loved the camaraderie, and the authenticity of what Startup Grind was about. We knew once one of the speakers came and he had a great experience. He said, please come to my office for lunch. And I went up to Sand Hill Road, his beautiful office, and he said, do you know what makes Startup Grind special? He said it was the values. He said Startup Grind was about giving more than you take. It was about helping others before you help yourself. And it was about making friends. I said, of course it was. Wasn't that what every community and every event was about? He said emphatically, no. The values of Startup Grind is what made it special. People attending the events in Silicon Valley started to come up to me afterwards and say that they loved what we were doing, they loved our ethos and our values. Because Silicon Valley is sort of a melting pot for the rest of the tech world, people would come into town and then they would be going home. And many of them would say nothing like this existed in their city. And at first I sort of didn't believe it. But people were so persistent in saying, could we do this where I'm from, that eventually we allowed them to. And these early pioneer chapter directors started taking Startup Grind home to their communities and they started popping up all across the world. First, we had 5 cities, then 10, then 20, then we got to 30, and we realized we have all these incredible people all around the world, but none of them know each other. So brainstorming late one night in my garage where we worked, we came up with this idea, which we felt like was the easiest thing to convince everybody to come to Silicon Valley to meet. We decided to throw a big event. We invited all of our best past speakers to speak. People like Clayton Christensen, people like Patrick Collison and Anne Mirabeau. They all came. They all gave of their time. So did the directors, and that was the first global conference. This week we will host our 8th conference. From there we grew to 50 cities, and then 150, or then 100, then 150, and chapters started showing up in far parts of the world, places we never dreamed that startup people actually lived and worked. We had chapters in Rwanda, and in Tel Aviv, and in Palestine, in Mongolia, in Ghana, in Cape Town, in Guangzhou, in Tehran, Detroit, Toronto, Singapore, Seattle, London, and so many more. Today, Startup Grind has over 600 chapters in more than 100 countries. We have more than 1,000 volunteers that run these chapters in their city. Everything we do is grown locally. If there are chapter directors or members of chapter teams from Startup Grind in the room, would you please stand? Without these people, Startup Grind is impossible. We've hosted 10,000 events, educating more than 500,000 people in person. Every month, we host an event in 250 different cities, giving access to literally billions of people to be part of Startup Grind and to help get their startup the education that it needs and themselves the education that they need. Millions have joined our network and get educated and connected at startupgrind.com. We're just getting started. For me personally, the impact that Startup Grind has had on my life is something that's hard to put into words. When people ask about what success has come from Startup Grind, I often point to Startup Grind itself. Before Startup Grind, I had absolutely no idea how to build a company, as evidenced by my terrible track record before Startup Grind. But every month, after I went to an event and listened to a speaker, I would go home and I would apply the suggestions and the learnings of that speaker, and every month, our company would grow stronger. I've met the most incredible people through Startup Grind. When I began in 2010, I was an unknown person in Silicon Valley with few connections and multiple failed companies. But 10 years later, I, with the help of thousands of people, have created a global community of millions. A few years ago, I co-founded a company called Bevy, and we take the learnings and the methodology of what we've done at Startup Grind and apply it to some of the biggest companies in the world to help them build their communities. People that don't understand what we do or that don't understand startup people, they often tell me how baffled they are that we use the word grind. Like, it's so negative. Why can't you be more positive? And, you know, Startup Grind is not negative. Like, the Startup Grind is not about working to work. It's not about grinding yourself to the bone and ruining your family and your friendships and the world in the pursuit of money and professional success. There's no point, I have learned, in gaining the world if you lose your soul in the process. See, the true unicorns, I believe, are not the companies that have big valuations, but actually the true unicorns are the people who successfully scale their business and their lives at the same time. See, what Startup Grind is actually about, it's about improving yourself every single day. It's about creating a better future for the world. It's about taking care of your family and the families of the people on this earth journey with you. The Startup Grind is about giving more than you take. It's about helping others before you help yourself. And it's about building genuine friendships. Let me just close by saying, if you haven't been part of the first 10 years, well, first of all, where the heck have you been? but I hope you'll be with us for the next 10. Startup Grind can help you the same way it has helped me and countless others around the world. If you're in the pursuit of your own personal startup grind, we will always be there to support you, no matter who you are, no matter where you live. In the meantime, just don't forget, keep grinding. Thank you.